Welcome to How to Sell More. Today, we are asking the question, is cold calling still effective in 2024? I mean, listen, we could have asked this question in 23 and 22 and 21 and on and on and on. But here's why it's such an interesting question. Because I think for most of us, we believe that cold calling is dead. I mean, who answers the phone anyway? But today's guest, Marcus Chen, a 3-time SalesForce Top Sales Influencer and a Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book, 6-Figure Sales Secrets, will break down for us in detail, step by step, how to approach cold calling in 2024 to make sure it's not only effective, but breaks down all of the barriers, all of the fears, and all of the reasons why most of us are not willing to cold call. And so if that's something that you or your team needs to get better at this year as we face down the next 4 quarters of our fiscals, I'm Mark Drager. Let's get into it. So Marcus, before we hit record, we were talking about the fundamentals and how too often sales reps, business development people, marketing people, business owners, like we get so caught up in technology and funnels and acquisition models. We get caught up in all of this stuff. And it's like, what about the fundamentals? What about the fundamentals? So you have an amazing book that has a chapter in it that focuses on some of these fundamentals. Section 3 of your book. And this isn't a pitch for your book or anything, but you can pick it up, audience, if you want to. Section 3, how to prospect like a badass. And what you break down is the fact that cold calling or reaching out to people on the telephone, like calling them up and talking to them in real time, that's still a thing that happens and works. Can you dig into why this is so powerful, even today in 2024, and why we should be using this in our sales strategies?
100%. And first of all, thanks for having me on. And what's interesting is, like, I always think about what's really emerged in the last decade or so is amazing technology. So there's so many incredible outreach tools now where you can literally, you could scrape a list, you could plug it into a software, you could push a button, and you can send out thousands of emails a day to thousands of prospects.
I think that's called spamming, isn't it?
Yes, it's called spamming, and it has become almost the norm for a lot of organizations. And then it worked very well initially when we first got started, and now it's got worse over time because the operators aren't doing a good job. And because it's so easy to do, you start thinking about what's hard to do. And what's hard to do are things that, that aren't being automated, like actually making calls. Even if you have an auto dialer, it's making calls, you actually calling people. You not get to stand out, because I love good outreach tools. I love the sales navigator tools. I love all those tools that you can kind of integrate as part of your process to be omnipresent. But when you can also incorporate actually calling someone, having a conversation where they can hear your tonality, they can hear your presence, they can hear how you speak, and you bolt on everything else, you can cut through the noise pretty quickly. And this is a really powerful way to actually cut through the noise and actually do it, because most people are scared to actually make the call.
So for myself, I've always found I've not done a lot of cold calling in my business. I tend to prefer inbound, mostly because for my selling style, I need someone to present for me a challenge or an opportunity. If you give me your challenge, if you give me your opportunity, I will work with you until we arrive at the perfect solution. But when I'm calling someone up, I don't really feel like I've got a good reason. Like, I just don't feel like I've got a good enough reason to waste their time or to make the connection. And even if you're like, come on, treat everyone like you're going to save their life or something, it's still like, hey, I'm interrupting you to hope that maybe you'll talk to me to give me a challenge or opportunity so I can solve your problem for you. But they're not going to do that. So if people are like me, how do we go about cold calling better?
Great question. So, and I think it's important to understand, like, there is a completely different mindset of inbound versus outbound, right? Like, typically when you get like inbound leads, even if they're, say, opt into things, you're going to call those leads, they have some sort of like pain of some sort. Maybe it's a lead magnet. So they have some sort of interest. You can call those a little bit warmer, right? Or if it's an inbound request for a demo, they have some sort of need. So it's clear they have some sort of need of some sort. Now your goal is to hopefully show them why you're the best solution. On the flip side, when it's outbound, you're typically building a list, and then you're calling them with the hopes that you can book a meeting with them. So before you even start making the call, the first key fundamental is you have to actually build a quality list. That's number one. The mistake a lot of people make is they build a general list of an ICP, ideal customer profile, that's very general, very broad. So, for example, they're like, well, we sell to software companies in the US. So they do a big search and they find that there's like 30,000 prospects potentially. And they're like, oh, I'm going to start calling these people. But here's reality. Let's just say, for example, if we call them the CEO. The CEO of a company barely doing $1 million ARR versus one that's doing, say, 100 million ARR is very different. Very different organization, very different pains. So the first step is you actually want to really niche down to have this very clear ICP. So this is like old school marketing 101. It's like that dream target, that avatar. What's that person look like? And your list should reflect that first. Because if let's just say, for example, you're calling CEOs they're doing between 8 to 10 million ARR. They have a team size, let's call it, 50 to 100. Well, now they have probably more similar problems, especially if they're the same industry, of other people in that list as well.
And so you're doing list segmentation. So you're gonna break everyone down based on vertical. You're gonna break them down based on company size. And then would you then look at, so in your example, someone who's doing 8 to 10 million in annual recurring revenue as a CEO, they probably have a similar portfolio set to an AVP, VP, SVP, EVP of a much larger organization. And so you start to then break out everyone into these individual lists or segmentations. So that way you can start to understand their unique responsibilities and challenges before you ever reach out?
100%. 100%. Because now your messaging can be really spot on, right? Because you're going to find, like, you call that CEO, the founder really of that $8 million company, they control usually everything for the most part. And everything they do is going to be directly impacted. You call the AVP of a larger organization, which is a different list size, they're going to have different concerns and pains and issues as well.
They got to manage up. That's the only thing they care about.
100%, 100%. So like the pain points you're calling on are going to be very, very different, right? So the mistake I see some people make is, like, let's just say, for example, they sell a customer success, like software, like a chatbot or something, right? Like an AI chatbot for customer care, for people, for new customers and for current customers, right? So when they're calling like a customer success manager, that customer success manager has very different problems than the actual CEO. So, like, for example, I'll give you examples. So this happened last week. I was talking to an account executive, and they're calling these customer success managers. And the biggest issues customer success managers have is they're usually dealing with manual support tickets. So they're very frustrated because their team is like missing tickets. It's taking a long time. People are getting really mad, and then they have to deal with all the issues. So they have their specific pain, and the solution is going to help solve that. But here's the reality. If that customer success manager went to their VP, their CFO, and said, hey, I found this tool makes my job easier, they're not going to care. They're not going to care. And the reality isn't. So I asked the rep, I said, hey, listen, so who's a common decision maker? Usually it's CFO in the situation for that size of business. And I'm like, what does the CFO care about? They're like, well, they care about cash flow. They care about efficiency. They care about profit margins. Great. So how does your solution tie to actually achieving that? They're like, well, if they have a better tool in place, they're going to stop losing tickets. So this way they're going to lose customers, which will increase the lifetime value of customer and reduce their customer churn, which will increase cash flow. And then they also sell to those customers more, make more money. And it leads into this spin-off. I'm like, beautiful. So now when you actually are reaching out to say the CFO, how should your messaging switch? And because the light go off. They're like, oh my gosh, you're right. I can't be talking about how we're going to make the job of the customer success manager easier. We need to leave the solution that's actually going to make them more profitable, increase cash flow, and reduce their customer churn.
And so in this example, it sounds like there's two potential paths to be able to arrive at sale. So you can go to the customer success manager and you can provide them with the tools they need and then hope that they'll be able to sell up and maybe even empower them to sell up. Or you can go after the CFO, the veto, the decision maker, and then have them implement. But in both areas, these are typically unbudgeted expenses, And so
100%.
Unless if we're falling into the trap of saying, like, let's make sure we add this to next year's budget, in both cases, we need to try and create such interest that we can get the demo or we can get the meeting to be able to prove our case and then build up enough need and proof point to create budget when budget hasn't even been set aside for this. So in your
100%.
experience, is it better to go lower and work your way up, or you just go after that top decision maker?
So I primarily, and this is generally speaking, I go for the top decision maker, right? Because if we can go in and get executive sponsorship up front. So for example, let's say we reach out to the CFO. We say, hey, my name is Marcus with company X. The reason I'm reaching out is I'm working with other CFOs such as X, Y, and Z, providing really simple solutions that actually increasing profitability, reducing customer churn, and increasing the LTV of their customers for 2024 and beyond. Do you have some time to chat more detail this Friday at 8? They're like, okay, well, tell me more. Let's set up time and talk. So now we have a conversation, and I'm going to leave the hypothesis, right? Say, hey, this is what I see happening in other organizations. Is this happening to you, right? And I want to get their buy-in. So I'm not going to do like a full demo. My goal is like, hey, is this a real issue that you're having? Can I get your sponsorship on this? They'll be like, yes. Okay, cool. Marcus, I want you to talk to the director of customer success now. I'll just go get the details, find out for me. And I'll talk to these people as well. So now I can start multi-threading that deal and start going down into the weeds of the organization to see the real data, work with them as well, and continue to keep that person in the loop as well, so we can kind of work the deal together to actually close, right? And if you do a really good job, what you can actually do is you take someone and they have what I call a latent need. And a latent need it's a need they don't realize they have. It's a need they don't realize they have, right? But only through education, only through discovery can you uncover that need, right? So for example here, to tell a story within a story, it's kind of like my teeth are feeling totally fine. I go to the dentist, I think things are totally fine. They start looking at my gum, they start measuring something. They say, oh, Marcus, actually looking at your gums, it's been receding drastically since we last saw you. Wow. Show me. They show me, hey, if you continue down this path, you'll probably develop gum disease and you'll probably have to remove your teeth and get like dentures or like something crazy. I'm like, oh, wow, let's get this taken care of. So that was a latent need that didn't know existed, and they create and turn into an active need. So if you do a good job in your sales process, you realize most people have a latent need unless it's an inbound lead. They don't even realize. They just have said, this is just how things are. But if you can help them realize how much pain at the lower level and how it directly impacts their business objectives and initiatives, now you potentially have a business case. So if you can get them to understand this to be the case, you start moving them through the process, right? Does that make sense so far? Let me pause for a second.
I love it. And if I can deconstruct what I think I've heard you say,
Absolutely.
Even with your initial script. So you make contact, you establish a quick rapport, but essentially what you're looking to do is say, hey, I'm reaching out to you for this reason. I've been working with, and you list a few people for proof points, so that way that you can get their immediate attention, establish proof points. You say, I'm reaching out for these reasons, and really they may be unknown pains within the business. So I'm used to a framework that I typically work in terms of, whether clients are problem aware, whether they're solution aware, whether they're vendor aware, what have you. But we're establishing that these pain points might exist within a business, and we're simply asking them if they would acknowledge that they may be happening in theirs. You set out a hypothesis and you ask for buy-in. And in this case of the example, you've been given essentially an internal referral. You've been told to connect with James. And when you call James up, you can say, James, your CFO said I need to reach out to you because I'm in the process of doing blah, 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 blah. And now you have full authority to just
100%.
Dig into this. And on top of that, you've moved to a consultancy point of view because now you can come back to the CFO and essentially say, I have done all of this work. We have established a need, and here you go. And I mean, you've does this actually work, or does it just sound good with what you and I kind of spitballing it?
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Okay.
Just like anything, right? It's simple, it's not easy, right? Because this means a few things. Number one, you need to be able to hold your own hand on a conversation with that exec. So some of the mistakes some people make is they're really good at the lower level. Right, they're really good with the people that are kind of the same level as them, but when they go to the exec level, they aren't able to hold their own. They lack the confidence and the composure to actually have an executive conversation. Because what happens is most people are so focused on the product; they're product focused. So usually what they do is they get in these conversations with the execs and they say, "Hey, I'm glad we're talking. Let me show you our product here. It's XYZ benefits, absolutely incredible, blah blah blah." And the CEO is like, "What are you talking about? It's so like below me." I mean, it's not saying that, but that's how they're thinking, right? So versus when we lead with a problem or we lead that hypothesis on how it's actually going to help their business, now it's very, very different. And when you start thinking this way, it becomes far more effective to actually start, moving down into the process. Now, in some situations, that's a perfect world, right? In some situations, you can reach out to that top person over and over, multiple channels, and not get a hold of them. So I'm going to go a little bit lower. It's to the point of kind of mapping the account. Maybe you can only get in at the customer success manager level, at the lower level. So if you go in there, so you still do your best, you go inside there, but now it's a little different. So now once you go inside there, your messaging is different, right? You go in there and now you're diving deep. You're trying to map out the whole account, but you're also trying to uncover what's really important for all the key stakeholders in that deal and how your solution can help align to those stakeholders' needs as well. And how can you progress through your sales process to involve the right people to actually get approval and buy-in? It's obviously, it's more work to do. It's never linear is the thing, right? But if you know there's multiple players in the deal that you got to get closed, how can you identify as fast as possible who the players are, what's most important for each of them, and how can you align your solution to what each person needs, right? It's very simple to say. It's very hard to do in real life because you deal with human beings at the end of the day.
And I find people tend to be too precious with these outreaches or these contacts because you don't want to burn an opportunity, and many people will sit on the opportunity rather than even pursue it and burn it.
Oh yeah.
Is that a real concern, or is really volume our friend here because we're just going to be able to learn through kind of pattern recognition?
Well, I think that there's a balance, right? There's a balance where it's like you want the quality, but you also want a quantity as well over time. And it's not a black and white answer because it depends on what you're selling, deal sizes. If you're selling to say the enterprise, where you might have a book of business of like say 20 accounts total, and that's all you can sell for the whole year, you have to be much more strategic with that versus if you're say an SMB rep, or you sell the SMB market. It's like, you have thousands of people you can sell, right? But at the end of the day, when you're able to have really relevant messaging and have real conversations, you can have success even on a grander scale. As the deal size go up, the stakes are bigger. So you take more time to actually be strategic in your outreach. And then what's interesting is the higher up you go, the more the common rules you kind of break with the relevant messaging, because typically at the SMB level, you kind of go for really short, simple emails and like kind of, relevant. You can like try to go for like 50 words or less and you can do pretty well with that. But it goes to like really big opportunities. You can break the mold and have a hyper-personalized email that's pretty lengthy. But if it's like super relevant and you do a good job with your outreach, you can still cut through the noise pretty nicely too.
So it comes back time and time again to just really understanding your audience, understanding your targets, your prospects. I don't think I've had a single person on the podcast who hasn't referenced that in some way, which I find interesting. Now, when you're working in these larger organizations, often the things that you're handing come in my experience, in two ways. Either one, the organization has done the job. You as a leader have done the job to equip your team with the exact thing that works. Do not deviate. It's proven it works. In most cases, though, I think people think it works, and it probably doesn't. And that's why we find that there are these superstars who are able to just completely outperform everyone else, because at the end of the day, and I think maybe you were one of these people. You got 10 promotions over 10 years at all of these different organizations. I have to imagine you were breaking the mold.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I heard this term from Patrick Bet-David a long time ago, and I always love the term. He said that there are certain people in organizations where they treat what they do like it's their own business. He called it an intrapreneur. And I find an entrepreneur, when you have that mindset, like whatever you're handed, whether it's a good or bad tech stack, whatever the recessions, whatever the market conditions are like, whatever your leadership is like, certain people will say, regardless whatever it is, I'm going to take that hand and I'm going to do my best with it, right? And I find the most successful salespeople always think that way. And that's what I've always done, right? So in my first role I was in, we had no tech stack, we had nothing. We didn't have any frameworks. It was like good luck. It was like very much like play the numbers game. High volume, that's what they want us to do. It's like there was no training, right? I had to figure it out, and I figured I had some success over time. And then in my next role, I went for two major companies. When I switched companies like 5 years later, they actually had a playbook in place, but it was like really like kind of old school, like just like it was like the company from like 1930s, and I'm like, yeah, I'm to a certain extent, but there's things that I figure out over time based on human behavior and psychology and my own study of what people are really like that can actually apply better. So I actually took even some of the basis of what they had, and I simply applied critical thinking skills. And I mixed in what I'd done before, and I was able to have really cool results because of that, right? So kind of like school. When you just like memorize facts, you memorize numbers, you memorize like certain things, you can only go so far. You can get decent grades, but not really amazing grades. You don't have really a great life. But if you can understand why things work in a certain way, why certain frameworks work, why psychology works, how people actually act and move, then you could take that, you can adjust and tweak to fit you, right? That's why I think it's better to focus on having really good frameworks and understand why people take action versus try to memorize a script. And I always picture like, if you have a good sales process, It's kind of like if you're driving on like a 10-lane freeway. Everyone's heading the same direction, but depending on who's on the road, different cars, people driving different speed. You can speed up, slow down, go left, go right, merge different lanes. You get off the freeway, you get back on the freeway, but you're still heading the same direction because you know the framework. And I think the mistake a lot of people make, especially for companies, is they say, "Hey, here's a script." They say, "Cool," and they either try to stick to that lane, going super slow though. You're stuck to be on that truck, and you have to go. You're like, you can be late to where you want to go, right? Or they completely go off the freeway and they're just doing whatever, thinking they can figure it out, which doesn't really work either. That's why I like frameworks. The frameworks are actually scalable, and they teach people actually how to think and have critical thinking skills versus saying, "Do exactly like this."
And if I'm in a sales role myself, or maybe I'm a leader looking for a great salesperson, what traits should I be developing? What traits should I be looking for?
So obviously resilience is probably pretty common. Resilience I'm all about, right? Being able to persevere and push through. Big fan of that. I love the ones who have the entrepreneur spirit. So like those who like, they have the internal drive and motor to just take things on their own and just like solve things. I love that. I also love people who have a really high expectation of themselves. So like, for example, you typically will see that people that consistently win everything in life, like every sport they touch, everything they pick, they seem to just excel in it. They usually have an inner drive. You can't create that drive. Either you have a drive or you don't. You can't create that drive, right? And you trying to motivate them by comp plan it's short-lived. What I also really like is coachability. That's a really big one. Just being coachable. So even if they are highly successful, but are they coachable? Like, are they open to actually, to actually learn and adapt and change and pivot as a result? I also want to see what their potential untapped skills are, their future potential. So I believe a lot of people have like skills within them that are just waiting to be untapped. So I like to see what's their bandwidth like, right? It hasn't coachability, because they're coachable, then you can help squeeze out that max potential. You can do more beyond what their current role is. Fun, I think it's important. Like, you don't want to hang out with boring people. At least I don't. Like, I gotta have fun with them. I think it's really, really, really key. I think any of them missing are key. If they have some innate sales ability, it's always a little bit nice for sure. It's not necessarily a must, but like if they actually have some intrinsic sales already, just based on their personality, which is great. Let's see. There's a couple that I'm kind of biased on, but I like these. I think these help. I think in process and structure and long term, if they can think that same way as well, I think it's really, really nice as well, because then they'll hopefully make better, like they'll make better business decisions in the field. And it's actually sell good business versus like just trying to close a deal. They actually understand like negotiation, they understand how businesses work, et cetera. That's always a plus too. But those are probably a handful of things that for sure, when I'm hiring people for myself or with other teams, we want to look for those type of characteristics.
This has been amazing. I've been speaking with Marcus Chen. He is the author of the book, 6 Figure Sales Secrets. If you'd like actually a free copy of the book, you can go over to closewithchen.com and he has an offer over there. Marcus, I do have one question for you before we wrap up this talk. What is your number one tip for us to sell more?
So number one tip, okay, super simple. Stop trying to sell. Stop trying to sell. And I know you're like, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is when you focus on selling, the process can smell the pushiness, the
desperation is just like
desperation. It reeks commission breath. You don't want that commission breath.
Yeah, that skunk on Warner Brothers or whatever, Pepe Le Pew,
Pepe Le Pew,
with it's everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And instead, focus on actually serving. Right. And what I mean by that, when you focus on serving, then you start realizing you're going to actually focus on what their problems are, how you can really help them with the problems. And if you really can't help them, you'll let them know and do your best to guide towards a place that they can. And we actually focus on actually just serving them at a truly deep level. That's when you start to really master selling.
That was a rapid fire conversation. I enjoyed having Marcus on so much, but let's wrap up this talk with our 3-point roundup. Number 1, cold calling is still effective in 2024. And it can actually help you cut through the clutter and the noise of the robocalls and the spamming calls and the SMSs and the email marketing campaigns and everything else that's going on. Because frankly, most salespeople are not willing to do the work, to build the list, and to make the calls. Number 2, to have success in cold calling, you must take the time and put in the effort to build a high-quality prospect list. So first, identifying your ICP or your ideal customer profile, and then building out your list, segmenting them to these profiles, understanding their pain points, understanding their needs, understanding their requirements. That alone will see a greater impact on your success rate than probably anything else we talked about today. And number 3, this is so powerful. There's a huge difference in how you handle inbound versus outbound leads. Totally different types of prospects, totally different mindsets, different levels of understanding or awareness, different needs. You cannot treat outbound cold calling or outbound lead generation the same way you treat inbound. Now, those are some powerful lessons. And so I want to thank Marcus Chen for joining us. You can learn more about him by heading over to his website, sixfiguresalesacademy.com. And while you're there, if you want, you can claim a free copy of this download of this guide he put together. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Closing More and Earning in the Top 1% of Salespeople Without Sleazy Sales Tactics. So if you want to jump into his funnel, if you want to connect with him, you certainly can. Check him out over there. Or you can find him, of course, on Instagram, The Real Marcus Chen. He's over on LinkedIn, Marcus Chen MBA. And while you're over on LinkedIn, why not give me a look up? My name is Mark Drager, and you can find me. I have the black and white photo with the little blue background. I would love to connect with you. You can shoot me a DM with thoughts on this topic. You can jump into the conversations for our posts with any extra ideas you may have. Or if you have a question for me, go ahead and shoot them over. We are collecting some for a very special upcoming episode. And so with that, we will wrap up this talk. But before we go, I have one more thing for you. I have to ask you, if you've made it this far into the podcast, you should probably subscribe. And here's why. Every single week, we share strategies and tips just like what Marcus shared with us to supercharge your business growth and to boost sales. So with that, I'm Mark Drager, and I will catch you in the next episode.